Hi, sophomores. We're going to cover some further important foundational information here about author's purpose and archetypal analysis. These tie together very closely with each other, as well as a third thing that we'll be adding later. Author's purpose requires strong verbs. As honor students, you need to start analyzing literature for author's purposes. To do this, keep in mind that when people write, they always have at least one of the following main purposes in mind. To inform, think of the way your biology textbook is written, it's to convey that information fairly objectively to you. To persuade, so think of the opinion editorial page in a newspaper. Someone has a side of an issue that they're on and they would like to argue in defense of their side, provide evidence, try to sway you, convince you to believe the same thing as them. Or to entertain, like the stories you read as a child, where it's just kind of for fun, a little bit more simplistic. The best one for us then, the best author's purpose, is persuasive. When analyzing literature for the author's purpose, always look for a deeper meaning beyond entertaining or even the moralistic. He teaches us that we should all share is not profound enough. It is best to think of authors as social critics. What elements of what culture are they commenting on and why? Of course, to accomplish such social commentary, authors might choose any combination of informative, persuasive, or entertaining work. So to get that deep analysis, whenever you can, you should link your author's purpose to his or her opinion about humanity regarding politics, culture, religion, race, behaviors of a society, or gender. To help you remember those words, we've got this little mnemonic device. Parents can't respect really bad grades. So the beginning letter of each word in that sentence matches the beginning letter of the list of categories that you want to connect an author's purpose to. These things fall under an umbrella called New Historic Criticism, and we're going to expand way more on them in a later lesson, probably next week. So don't worry about that too much. We want to get more into the author's purpose template and language before we delve into those. So that's kind of the advanced version, and we're still at the early steps. The author's purpose thesis template looks like this. It's for analytical essays where we're, looking into the deeper meanings. So that takes us through most of sophomore year. And if you continue on to AP English for junior year, this will also be very, very helpful for you. So it goes in the red there, the character, event, or literary device. So kind of the topic, the thing. And then the yellow part. In the genre, title, by author's name. So the context, what you're reading and by whom. Highlights, demonstrates, commends, chastises, persuades, etc. So that long green section will end up being just one strong verb usually. And then the blue, whatever it is that the author is pointing out about humanity. So that's their purpose, their deeper lesson, the meaning, about some truth of humanity and the universe that they want their readers to walk away with. So that might be a little confusing. If you look at the sample, it might make more sense. The colors there are to help you line up each thing to the proper piece of the template. Icarus and Phaethon's rebellious behavior in Ovid's epic poem The Metamorphosis demonstrates the ancient Roman belief in obedience to one's elders. It might seem a little simplistic to be following a template, but we want you to stick to it until you're comfortable getting all four pieces into your thesis statements. So if you have all four pieces, then you can be fairly certain that you have set up your essay in a way that you can very effectively tie back all of your main points to. There are stylistic variations that you can start playing around with if you have those successful sentence construction skills with all four parts. Just make sure you have those pieces. So again, throwing all those colors at you to try to help you keep track of what's what. The topic, or like the character, event, literary device, what the author is using, the what, okay, all the red. Plus you need the context. That's like the genre Genres are things like in the poem, essay, short story, film, novel, things like that, plus the title, which will be in quotation marks if it's a short story or a poem, and italicized when it's a novel or a play. And if you can't italicize, you can underline, like in handwriting, for example, by the author's name. So it's, in what text, it's the where and the who. Moving on to the green, that's your strong verb. Things like highlights, demonstrates, commends, chastises, persuades, and so on. So it's the how. And then blue is the message. Whatever he or she, your author, is pointing out about humanity. So it's their purpose, it's the why. That action verb, that green, strong verb that you need to include in your thesis statement clarifies for the reader which type of purpose you are identifying. Notice below that the action verbs that imply opinions are more precise and suggestive of a persuasive purpose. And ideally, like we said a few slides ago, students will identify a persuasive purpose. That's the deepest, best one to strive for. It's A-level analysis when done well. Generally, students who stop at merely identifying informative, which usually the essays stick with B or C level analysis, even when you do it well, or entertaining purposes, which are too shallow and surface level for us, so D or F level analysis, are not thinking deeply enough about what was happening in the author's world to inspire the author's creativity. You want to look for their social commentary, especially if you have time to look up the author's historical context. Again, we will expand on this principle when we get into the new historic criticism connection. But first, let's become more comfortable with the verbs. I'm not going to read these all out loud, but I want you to look at this slide and the next three, I think, have verbs that you're going to want to become familiar with so that you don't use the same one over and over. So we have on this slide entertaining purpose verbs and informative purpose verbs, but you don't really want to stick with these levels. So become more comfortable with the following slides, which again, I'm not reading, so you won't have audio for, but they have all the different kinds of persuasive purpose verbs that you should start, picking a few to memorize and have in your writer's toolbox. While we're here learning about strong verbs, I also want to point out what some weak verbs are that you should avoid. Those include shows, uses, utilizes, paints, states, stirs, tasks, thinks, twists, and conjures up. They're not wrong to use, but they're really not reminiscent of a sophisticated and mature voice and style, which is what we want to try to develop this year. You can see the asterisk next to shows. Too many students rely on show as a main verb in all of their writing. Please get used to cringing at the sight of it and substituting a stronger, more precise verb. So when we do our first passage analysis essay in a couple of weeks for Catcher in the Rye, one of the things we'll do is have you highlight if you used shows, and sometimes people will have, 8 different instances of that being their only verb. So then we're going to have to go back to the previous slides and kind of thesaurus, plug in, synonym our way to better choices of language. Here are some more thesis statement examples. Notice that, again, I've color-coded them so you can try to keep track of the 4 different sections, which I reminded you of down here. Momotaro's victory in the folktale Peach Boy glorifies the idea that good will always conquer evil. Notice there should be an author in the yellow part, but it's an ancient folktale with no known author. Next up, through the ongoing feud between the Montagues and Capulets, in the play Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare chastises the irrationality of holding grudges. Another one for Peach Boy is Momotaro's relationship with his 3 companions in the folktale Peach Boy highlights the importance of unity, which is needed to overcome the trials one faces throughout their life. So some important notes to take away from these examples as you begin to think about writing your own is just a couple detail things, like this is a short story, just like a poem or an article, it has the quotation marks, while Romeo and Juliet is a full play, so it's italicized. And if you were handwriting something and couldn't differentiate well, you would do underlining instead in place of the italics. We want to try to use more formal academic writing. So we have the trials one faces rather than phrasing that uses something like you, right? Overcome the trials you face in your life. That's a little bit too casual for how we want to write. Let's see. And obviously taking care to spell things correctly, match your verb to your subject. So sometimes you'll need the S and sometimes you won't at the end of your verb, and so on. And all 4 pieces are there in all those examples. So to practice, before I have you write your own thesis statements, let's just work on identifying the type of author's purpose for which these thesis statements argue. So there's 5 different strong thesis statement examples. So if you read through them, you can further become comfortable with seeing all the 4 parts together that the template requires. I won't read them out loud, but you can, in the next little section, it'll pop up to let you select whether you think it's informative, persuasive, or entertaining. We need to put all of this information together with archetypal analysis now. So we're starting to get into the deeper thinking. So let me read this little background to you. Archetypal critics recognize story patterns and symbolic associations. They know how to form assumptions and expectations from encounters with black cloaks, springtime, evil stepmothers, and the like. These patterns suggest that meaning cannot exist solely within a work. There is an automatic, larger conversation with history and the world. Archetypal images and story patterns encourage readers and viewers of films to participate ritualistically in basic beliefs, fears, and anxieties. Even untrained, there are archetypes that our collective unconscious naturally taps us into. So when you write analyses in this class, you write with the assumption that Jung's theory of the collective unconsciousness is valid, that authors' works provide insights about the realities of the truths of the collective unconsciousness, that modern authors are familiar with Jung's theory and use archetypes not only because of their access to the collective unconsciousness, but because of their awareness of archetypes and their knowledge that the trained audience might be performing archetypal analysis. Furthermore, you write with the assumption that archetypes in any given piece of literature unveil truths about humanity. This is the author's purpose. What are they teaching us about how the world works? So when you're trying to analyze a work, you first take the time to identify the archetypes, and then consider how that author's use of those archetypes is promoting some truth, which often will be a criticism about humanity. Here's an example. Hopefully this helps you start to see how it pieces together. The next slide will have a much longer example. The anonymous author of the folktale Peach Boy utilizes the archetype of hunting group of companions in the way Momotaro gathers his 3 animal allies. They are able to beat the odds and conquer an entire fortress of ogres, which suggests that the author believes in the power of good, loyal friends. It is good, the author suggests, that humans naturally seek to build relationships and rely on each other for help through hardships. So you can see when you're starting off your analysis, this first bit is almost a author's purpose thesis statement itself, as they establish what it is that he's using, the context. So we have the topic, the context. Verb, utilizes is not the strongest verb we could use. And then we get into the message. So this idea that it's promoting the power of loyalty, that's good for humanity. And here's the longer one, example 2, full paragraph. Through the triumph of unique individualistic characters in Tarzan, author Edgar Rice Burroughs persuades readers of the values of individuality, disregarding generalized stereotypes. Tarzan and his gorilla father Kerchak's tense conflict symbolizes the story's central archetype, the father-son conflict. The moment Kerchak meets Tarzan as an infant, he remarks, "It's not our kind," revealing his misgivings of humans, from page 7. His suspicion for humans, due to his suspicion of any species besides his own, limits his ability to trust others and prevents him from building a fatherly relationship with Tarzan. The failure of Kerchak as a father to Tarzan results from his inability to disregard his prejudiced distrust of humans and see Tarzan for who he truly is. Burroughs, the author, uses Kerchak's flaw to portray the values of being unbiased and having the individuality to ignore presumed judgments. While failure to ignore stereotypes prevents Kerchak from being a suitable father, one unique character's individualistic qualities allows her to help the hero and be a dominant figure in the story. This unique character is Jane, the Platonic ideal of the story, who provides guidance to Tarzan by teaching him about the human world, from page 37. Although Jane is a woman, she has strength and intellectual overtones, opposing the innocence and susceptibility frequently portrayed by female characters in stories. Jane's distinctiveness is the result of the author's intention to create a triumphant character in his story that is also unique, further supporting his purpose to express the value of individuality. So notice that it's not just summary. The author's not just saying what happened. They're delving into which archetypes match up with those things and characters that happen, and what is being taught, what the author is suggesting about some deeper truth of humanity or how the world works, because of the existence of those archetypes in the story. And again, it's not perfect. Both of these are real samples from previous students throughout the years, but they are strong. They are well done overall. And this is the kind of stuff you're going to end up producing as we keep practicing this. So now it's your turn. Write an author's purpose thesis statement that fits Richard Wright's short story, The Street. I'll put it in a space in Edpuzzle to type, and we'll wait to expand into full analysis. So first we'll start with the baby step of perfecting our thesis statements, and then we'll expand into those beautiful kinds of paragraphs that you saw. There will be space to write down questions, so if you've thought of one as you've worked through these notes, we will definitely address it, whether you write it or ask me verbally in class.